On a crisp day in Georgia, a train came to its ordinary stop at the Atlanta train station. However, this was no ordinary train ride, as it was carrying the fleeing governor, Rufus B. Bullock, back to New York. The question is, why was the governor fleeing his own state in such secrecy? In a term that has been surrounded and embroiled in voter fraud and corruption, Bullock wasn't just fleeing from political unpopularity, but for his own life.
Rufus Brown Bullock was an interesting character in the political stage of Georgia. He was not a native Southerner, and he represented the very unpopular Republican Party in their stances on black rights in the heart of the defeated Confederacy. Bullock was born on March 28, 1834, to abolitionist Voltaire Vedder Bullock and Jane Eliza Brown in Bethlehem, New York. After the family relocated to Albion, Bullock attended Albion Academy, where he excelled in communications technology and began managing the American Telegraph Company's Philadelphia office. After marrying Marie Elizabeth Salisbury, Bullock moved to Antebellum, Augusta to manage the Southern Express Company for several years. Although he opposed secession, Bullock accepted a job as a lieutenant colonel with the Confederate Army and operated telegraphs, railroads, and freights for both his company and the quartermaster's office. After the end of the war, Bullock decided to enter state politics, played an important role in the state's Constitutional Convention in 1867. In April 1868, Bullock won the governor's race against John B. Gordon, the popular Democrat, former Confederate general, and the future member of the KKK. During his tenure as governor, Bullock helped the state to prosper economically and was the leader in the movement to relocate the state's capital from sleepy Milledgeville to bustling Atlanta. However, his election was embroiled in accusations of voter fraud, and Bullock would receive negative backlash and face strong opposition for the length of his term. Governor Bullock's stance for equal rights for blacks did not sit well with the majority Democratic populace in Georgia. The fierce opposition forced Bullock to travel to Washington, D.C. to beg President Grant and the Republican Congress in support of his Reconstruction policies in Georgia. He also begged the president to have federal officials help enforce the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that protected African American rights. As Bullock pressed these issues, opposition increased greatly from the KKK because the state was shifting towards a more Democratic party. Margaret Mitchell's classic, Gone with the Wind, best expresses popular opinion of Georgia's governor.
A week before Scarlet and Rhett had announced their engagement, an election for governor had been held. The Southern Democrats had General John B. Gordon, one of Georgia's best-loved and most honored citizens, as their candidate. Opposing him was a Republican named Bullock. Bullock had won. If the capture of Georgia by Sherman had caused bitterness, the final capture of the state's capital by the carpetbaggers, Yankees, and Negroes caused an intensity of bitterness such as the state had never known before. Atlanta seethed and raged, and Rhett Butler was a friend of the hated Bullock. But far and above their anger at the waste and mismanagement and graft was the resentment of the people at the bad light in which the governor represented them in the North. When Georgia howled against corruption, the governor hastily went north and appeared before Congress and told of the white outrages against the Negroes, of Georgia's preparation for another rebellion, and the need for a stern military rule in the state. No Georgian wanted trouble. All Georgia wanted was to be left alone so the state could recuperate. But with the operation of what came to be known as the governor's slander mill, the North saw only a rebellious state that needed a heavy hand.
As tensions mounted, the citizens who opposed Bullock mounted a lost cause campaign to return the Democrats to power within the state government. Their efforts were quite successful, as the 1870 election results show that the state had solidly returned to Democratic control. As Democrats grew stronger within the state government, so did the power of the violent and vicious Ku Klux Klan. They began to use their influence to pressure Bullock to resign his position as governor. Pressure mounted to the point of death threats and violence against Bullock until he finally fled the state in secrecy in October of 1870. So secret was his departure that the Weekly Sun did not report his absence until September 27, 1871, nearly a year later.
Whereas Rufus B. Bullock, the governor of Georgia, has been remote from the seat of government, even from the state of Georgia, for nearly 3 months, and no one in the State Department, not even his private secretaries, know where he is or at the time of his return, and the law requiring the approval of signature of the governor to all executive warrants on the state treasury.
The controversial Bullock finally returned to Georgia in 1876 after being embarrassingly run off. He faced several charges of corruption, fraud, and malfeasance from his tenure as governor. His corrupt as the Democrats and KKK claimed that Bullock was. Bullock was found innocent not once, but twice by jury in Atlanta. After the court cases, he remained in Atlanta with his wife and became a very prominent citizen in the city. Bullock returned to Albion, New York in 1903, where he would live until his death in 1907. Although he was hated so adamantly by Democrats and the Georgia electorate, upon his death all flags at Georgia State buildings were lowered to half-staff. He was recognized for his help in boosting Georgia's devastated economy, removing the capital from the bustling Atlanta. Bullock is also still recognized as a good man who stood up for equality for African Americans and as a man of compassion and faith in the Constitution. As for his actions, Bullock defended himself to the last. The great issue has been and still is the question of Reconstruction, lifting the Negro from slavery to citizenship and establishing governments with the colored man as voter has aroused the dying hate of the Ku Klux democracy. Yet I seen fit, as I was earnestly urged to pander to their prejudices by betraying the principles of the Republican Party and shutting my eyes to a palpable violation of the laws and the wrong and injustice done by their expulsion of the colored members of the legislature. I would not only escape this ordeal, but these persons would have been as loud and as intemperate in their praise as they are now in their denunciation of me.